Welcome to Live at Your Edge. I'm Ashley. Today, I want to talk about fear. Fear is core to our experience as human beings. It is something that we all experience, sometimes on a daily basis, right? It shows up in so many forms in our life that are so familiar, like anxiety, nervousness, unease, dread, or foreboding. Fear is an extremely pervasive experience in our lives. It's hardwired into our systems, oriented towards our survival, right? So it's something that we all experience. And yet it's also something that can get stuck in our systems, get stuck and suppressed in our systems to a point where, fear is something that really affects how our quality of life is. It affects our ability to make decisions. It affects the drivers behind how we make decisions in our lives. To me, this is a particularly important topic to talk about at this moment, because as we move through this pivot point in human history, where a lot of intense change is happening out in the world and in our personal lives, it's kicking up a lot of our fears. As we're moving through this moment of history, there's this sort of sense that fear is rising in a lot of us. I personally feel that working with our fear is one of the most important things that we can do. I was listening to a podcast earlier today about this influential figure in public life. I thought the most revealing and interesting thing was when this person explained that they wake up every single day in terror. It really was enormously illustrative of what the driver is behind the way this person makes decisions. Because this person is making a lot of very influential decisions related to security and things like that. And when you understand that fear is an enormous driver in the decision making of someone that influential, it really makes you realize how much of our world and the experiences we have in it are shaped by people in fear. And I think that as growth-oriented people, who all of us who are here in this space are, we don't want to be making our decisions from fear. Instead, we want to be making our decisions from what feels right within, what feels true for us, what feels aligned for us, right? Most of us were not taught this skill set of how to be with our emotions. What most of us were taught was how to kind of push fear down and push through fear and do things anyway despite the fear. And in our culture anyway, here in America, there's a lot of talk about conquering fear. Like, you got to conquer that fear. You got to go out there and do the thing you're afraid of anyway, right? Just do it, conquer it, and you'll be over it. Personally, I would say that there isn't any such thing as conquering fear. There is such thing as moving through and transforming fear. If we have a fear of public speaking, say, and we have to give a talk in front of a big group of people and we're feeling super terrified, right? And nervous and sweaty palms and even panicky, maybe. Then we go and we give our talk, we do it, nothing horrible happens. And afterwards, everyone's saying, you did it, you conquered your fear, right? And they're meaning well, they're meaning you did something brave, right? That's what they mean. And so they're coming from the right place. But the truth is, that fear isn't truly conquered just from doing it. I think we've all been taught that that's the way to transcend our fear. But after giving a talk, your fear of public speaking isn't magically gone, right? Maybe the fear's a little quieter because nothing really bad happened. It went fine. And so you feel better, right? You feel relieved it's over and you feel like, I did it. And that's great. It's great to feel that way. But I'm going to bet that the next time we go to give a public presentation, we're not going to never feel any anxiety about it again, right? Just based on that experience, it's not going to completely release that fear, because the truth is that even though everything turned out okay, there's no guarantee that that will happen again, right? The core fear is of certain outcomes happening. Let's say that as an alternative to giving the presentation and everything going fine, some of your worst fears are realized. Let's say people laugh at you and you feel humiliated, right? You're not going to walk out of that experience being less fearful just because you did it. You're going to walk out feeling like your fears are confirmed. And so then the fear is compounded. So when we have this belief that our experience of doing the thing we're afraid of is what's going to transform our fear, we're actually still living in this state where only certain experiences will quiet the fear, while other ones that could still rear their head are giving us all of this anxiety in the background, right? I would say that the only way to truly transform fear is actually to grow to a point of total acceptance of what all the possible outcomes could be. And so that just takes some inner work. That's what I want to talk about today. So let's talk about it. Okay, so first let's talk about what is fear. So fear is the perception that we are under threat, right? That there is potentially danger. Fear is something that is hardwired into us. It is a survival-based emotion that is biologically adaptive and that triggers a nervous system response. Next, let's talk about how it often shows up in our lives. We have a lot of emotions that we describe using other names, but that are actually sort of different flavors and forms of fear as the core emotion. So things like anxiety, worry, dread, foreboding, nervousness, right? Things that I think for many of us are very familiar, sometimes daily experiences. So those are some of the big, more obvious ones, but I would say there are also some more subtle states that we may find ourselves in that also point to fear. Things like agitation, edginess, feeling insecure, self-doubt, overwhelm, even vulnerability. And then, of course, there are the physical or somatic signs of fear. Things like muscle tension, clenched jaw, shallow breathing, or holding our breaths. Things like rapid heartbeat, dry mouth, like the list goes on and on. It's essentially physiological signs that are created by sympathetic nervous system activation. And all of these things that I'm naming are things that can also be entry points for us into our fear. There are ways that we can find like a doorway into working with our fear when it comes up. And so what I want to share with you are some practices that I have learned over the last few years and used a lot myself to work with fear, and that I really believe can be extremely powerful practices for working with and transforming fear. So, number one is to create safety. This is a topic that we've talked about before on the podcast. This is a very important foundational practice for not just working with fear, but really with any emotion that you want to make a space for. Creating safety in the body, in our nervous system, is like a foundational component of effectively working with our emotion. And it sort of sets the groundwork for the work that we're going to do. So this means creating a calm, quiet space for ourselves where we can move some emotion, where we feel like we have some freedom to move our bodies, maybe make some sound, where we feel like we have a quiet, peaceful space that we can use as like a practice space. Another component of this is creating like a warm, loving, and tender space within ourselves, right? This is really a heart practice. In my opinion, this is something that we can be cultivating in our daily lives. And to be honest, we could record an entire episode just about this. And if you want more heart practices, there's a lot of really cool resources out there that you can go find. There's a lot of heart-centered meditations, but I'll share what some of my favorite things to do for this are. So some of this is long-term cultivating love for oneself. And that is a really hard thing to do and takes a lot of practice. So just being wherever we are with it, right? And not worrying if it's perfect or enough or whatever, right? Wherever you are is great. But for me, I love to do a little bit of sort of somatic practice in the heart space. So for me, focusing on my heart space. And if you're joining me on video, you can see a little bit what I'm doing. And if you're on the audio podcast, you can come check out the video if you feel that would be helpful. So our bodies are so responsive to touch. And so it can be so nice to have hands on the heart space, and sometimes just doing things like warming up the heart space, like using some nice gentle motion, like stroking over the heart space. I like to imagine sometimes that my heart is very armored, because I think oftentimes from walking around in the world, we sort of protect ourselves reflexively. And so any visualizations or practices to help soften that armor and bring up more tenderness can be so important here. It's sort of just cultivating that open, warm, loving heart space. So like I love to just sort of rub a warm, gentle hand in circles, or use both hands on the chest, on the heart space. And just doing that, you'll start to notice, I always start to notice a difference just from doing that. And then it's also can be helpful just to picture a person in your life, if you're a parent, your children maybe, or a pet or a partner or someone that you feel a huge amount of tenderness for. And then practicing bringing that tenderness to yourself, which I know sometimes it feels harder to do that because we sit with a lot of emotions about ourselves that don't feel like they're primarily centered in love, right? It can be harder to do that for ourselves. But I think that kind of tender-hearted feeling, bringing that to the space and to yourself is hugely powerful and really calming to the body. And for me, that's one of the most important things I do that creates a sense of safety. Now, there's another piece here, which is about cultivating an awareness of the higher self and the child self, these two layers of the self, which is a topic, again, that we've talked about actually on previous episodes of this show. So you're welcome to go back and listen to those. I would actually check out some of the episodes in season 2, and I can put some notes below about which episodes to check out. This is another important piece. It's just having awareness that you as a human being have a consciousness that is a higher consciousness that sort of holds a higher frequency and is like a safe, nurturing, loving consciousness within yourself that can hold a space for the inner child that lives within each of us, right? And that inner child is often the one experiencing a lot of turmoil and fear and anger and whatever the emotions are. And then lastly, I would recommend, sometimes it's just helpful to remind ourselves that it is safe for us to work with our fear. So just saying to ourselves, I'm safe to be with my fear. It's safe for me to work with my fear. It's safe for me to experience my fear, right? That's more of an affirmation, and it can be a really important signal to our bodies to remember that our emotions are not dangerous. It's not our emotions that are dangerous, right? It's unconscious emotion pouring out in a harmful way into the world that can be dangerous, right? When we're not practicing sitting with and being with our emotions and moving them. So the second practice I'd like to share is what I'm going to call amplification. What we're doing here is essentially bringing up our fear in our body. So often the most potent time to work with a fear is when the fear's been coming up a lot, right? Maybe you've just been sitting in a lot of anxiety. Or maybe you're just feeling a lot of dread about something or a lot of worry about something. What we're doing in this practice is we're allowing ourselves, we're inviting that emotion to get louder. And so sometimes it can help to sort of visualize what the triggers are, like picturing the things that you're afraid of, picturing the things that bring up that emotion, that anxiety. What we can do with this is we can keep inviting the fear to get as loud as possible. At least that is what I actually love to do. I love to ask myself, like, how terrified can I feel in my body? How intensely can I experience that emotion in my body? Let me amplify this fear. Let it speak up as loudly as possible. If that feels like too much, then what you can do is you can take baby steps, right? You can say, okay, I'm feeling this anxiety or fear. Can I feel it one level more intensely? Can I let it be a little bit louder? A little bit louder. What about a little bit louder, right? It's not really about it being like a level 10 intensity, but it can be. It's important that we just follow ourselves and our intuition about what's really serving us at that moment, right? Because maybe feeling at a level 10 isn't really going to serve us in this moment, right? It depends what's going on. So feel for yourself what actually feels like it's the most useful for you in that moment. And so then what we're doing is we're embodying the fear, right? We're letting our physical body be in the fear. One of the reasons for this is because often we're walking around with our emotions kind of suppressed, right? We're walking through our daily lives trying to act like everything is fine and we're okay and we're doing the things we need to do. And so the fear is sort of living in there, but it's not fully expressed, right? It's just sort of pushed down in there. And what we're doing is we're inviting it to come up, come out, and actually process in our tissues, in our body. So whatever your body naturally does. Sometimes for me, when I'm doing a practice like this, my body wants to like shake and tremble in terror, right? Sometimes I want to get down on the floor and curl up in the fetal position. Sometimes I just burst into tears and I'm crying and I'm crying and I'm crying in fear, right? Like I'm just so terrified. Again, what we're basically doing is we're allowing the thing that we've been kind of pushing away to come in. The kind of intention that I like to bring for this practice is one of invitation, inviting, right? We're not trying to force it. We're just inviting the fear to come up as intensely as possible. And the physical embodiment piece is so important, okay? It's letting your body do whatever it naturally wants to do when you're feeling this fear really intensely. Instead of the more automatic behavior that we're living in most of the day, which is pretending that everything's okay. This is part of why having a really calm, safe space, a room in your house or somewhere that feels like you can move and not be self-conscious and let yourself move, make noise. You can make guttural sounds, like whatever sound or movement or bodily experience comes up, do that. However long it takes, right? So stay with it for as long as that cycle feels like it's flowing. And then that can sort of naturally lead into the third practice that I want to share, which is mentally living out the fear. This is a practice that I really feel can be immensely powerful. When we have a fear, often what we are sort of subconsciously doing is we're essentially pushing away an experience that we don't want to have. Let's say we have a fear of a loved one dying or being really seriously hurt. Often that will carry with it a kind of internal pushing away kind of energy, right? Like, no, absolutely not. That's not allowed to happen. It's not allowed to happen. And the same is true of any other fear, right? Let's say we're fearful of a violent event happening when we're in a public space, or let's say we're afraid of public speaking. There's this energetic pushing it away where our minds can, sometimes to me, it almost feels like my mind can barely stand it, that feels like it's even theoretically possible, right? And I want it as far away from me as possible. That's a very natural orientation, I think, to things that we're fearful of. We want to push them away. But so what this practice is about is you're basically energetically trying to pull back the hand that is pushing it away. You're letting the fear in. It doesn't mean you're inviting the thing to happen, right? That is not what we're doing, but we are letting ourselves mentally experience what we are afraid of. And this can be immensely powerful, right? So let's say we're afraid of a loved one dying. What we're doing in this moment, in this container of safety we've created for ourselves, is we're letting ourselves experience in our imagination them dying. If we're afraid of being humiliated in public, we are imagining that happening. And then this part is key, right? We are then letting all the emotion that comes up with that move the best we can, right? Just wherever we are with this, the best we can, we're letting ourselves feel grief, feel the terror, feel the shock, feel the humiliation, like whatever experience that we are absolutely desperate not to have. We are using our imagination, which is a very powerful tool, to let us experience that. And often what comes up for me when I do this is a lot of tears, tons and tons of crying, just like helpless, what feels like just helplessly crying and crying and crying. This is so powerful because suddenly we are processing our fears. We are processing them through our bodies. And whatever your process for this looks like is perfect. There may not be tears for you, right? Maybe you just want to curl in a little ball and you're picturing something in your mind and not your body is feeling tight and not ready to move emotion. That's okay. Stay with it to the extent you can. This can be a very intense experience. And so this is part of why the container of safety and that tender, loving quality that we talked about before is so important, right? Because it's really supportive in going through something like this. I have personally found that this practice for me has been one of the most transformative practices that I have. Essentially what we're doing is we are surrendering to the fear. And the state of surrender is extremely powerful. Surrendering to what is or what could be can literally alchemize our fear. It can literally transform our fear into this kind of state of trust, surrender, and peace. Now, it's important to say, I think, that this is not a process where your fears will just disappear overnight, at least not usually. Often what we're doing when we take time to do a process like this is we are moving through a layer of our fear. So like a layer that has come up through either an experience we've just had, or maybe you've been experiencing the mental symptoms we talked about before, like agitation or worry or anxiety. Whenever it's coming up, what we're doing is we're processing a layer of the fear. And so after that layer has changed in some way as a result of the work we've done, there may be more layers that will surface, right? And so it's like that onion analogy that you're sort of working through each layer of the onion. It's important to remember that the transformational effects of this practice will take time. So the initial practice will start the transformation process, but it may take days or weeks or sometimes even longer, right? Months before the full result of the work we've done becomes more settled in our body and we feel the new state arrive. When the fear has moved out of our bodies, a new state of being and a new relationship to all the things in our life can emerge. I'm somebody who's experienced a lot of chronic anxiety in my life and has really found that processing my fear this way has been some of the most transformative work that I've done to my daily lived experience and my sense of peace and calm with the things that are happening, not only in my life, but in the world at large. So that's what I really want to share with you today. I know that we all live with this stuff, right? And fear is just such a powerful force in all of our lives. It's such a powerful force driving a lot of what we do. And so, yeah, I cannot think actually of a topic that feels, at least for me, like more important and present in the world right now. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next episode.